Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Omega Files. I'm your host, Dr. Freedom, and tonight we've gathered around to discuss a rather, controversial yet amazing episode of Doctor Who. Something I never thought I would see them touch, and that was, racism, segregation, and whatnot in the episode called Rosa. I don't know how to describe it. I was captivated was probably the best word. I was locked in for the whole thing, but I want to hear your guys' view on it. We're going to start at the top this time. So starting up in the top left-hand corner, let's start off with Philippacha.
I went into this not knowing what the whole story of Rosa Parks is about, and as it went along, the more I got invested in it, the more I thought it was beautifully done. And the only niggle I had, I don't know whether it would have been worthwhile having that bloke, whoever that was his name, Crows or whatever his name is. I thought it would have done better to be purely historical for the sake of it being historical, rather than having in it to mix up a bit. When Ryan got slapped around the face at the beginning, I thought, wow, did he not get his black slapped out of him at that point? I thought, bloody hell, that was a bit harsh. But overall, I think Yaz as well had a bit more to do, which fleshed her out a bit more. So that's good on her part. Even down to Jodie, she was a bit more doctorish than she has been in the past couple of episodes. So I liked her in this one a lot as well. The subject matter was very well handled. Rosa Parks, the woman that plays Rosa Parks, very good, spot on. The bus driver bloke, I liked him because he was kind of nasty, but he really hit the nail on the head, being a bit of a racist as he was. Overall, the story is fantastic, and the tune that they use in the story, it broke my heart, but it was good. It was very good. So I really enjoyed it, and I urge anyone who hasn't seen it to go and watch it again. Yeah.
Okay, Matt Rose.
Hello. Yes, as just Philip mentioned, I really did like this episode as well. I really do like it when Doctor Who goes all out in a historical episode. I thought this was really well done. I have never seen, Doctor Who has had dark episodes in the past, but I've never seen Doctor Who quite as dark as this. Whoever approved this at the BBC must have known exactly what they were doing when they read this script. I have never seen a realistic script like this that is true to a historical in all the years of Doctor Who, with it being so spot on and knowing the story of Rosa Parks and what she would do to change the future of history. It really captivated me from the moment they arrived from the TARDIS. I thought the ensemble cast, even though it was quite small, it was just an incredible feel. I'm loving the darker tone. I never thought I would hear so much dark language in Doctor Who that I thought I would never hear. It was just amazing from the moment the music played to the moment it ended. I think this series has been such a treat, and Rosa is going to be definitely a standout episode on all the rewatches to come. I think they could do something like this again in the future, who knows, but it just stands out as one of the best historicals that they've done in such a long time.
All righty, Lee.
Hey, how you doing? Quite possibly one of the best, or if not the best, Doctor Who episode I've ever seen. It had me on so many levels. It was storyline. It was, like you said at the beginning, it was captivating. It was emotional. I found myself at least twice, having a little tear in my eye, especially at the end. The score to the whole episode was perfect. I thought the music that was enticed with the episode was spot on. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't undone. It was just perfect all the way through. Like Phil said, it was nice to see Yaz getting a bit of attention in this episode to speak, got her out in the open a little bit. Overall, I just loved the entire episode from start to finish. It's like somebody just said, it's something I can watch over and over again.
All right, let's move over to DWC.
Undeniably a powerful episode, although I will touch on a bit, say they've never handled racism before. They sort of had done in analogies in a way. They did it in The Mutants, and they subtly touched upon it in The Power of Kroll. But yes, this is the first time in a historical context that, excuse me, that they have tackled racism in a huge issue, and it just does not pull its punches, no matter what it does. From Ryan getting slapped in the face and be told, and even told he'll hang from a tree and all that. And there was some interesting parts about Yasmin on the bus, actually, where she's asking, where do I come on the bus? And I'm thinking, my dad was even saying, that's a very good question, because where do you come with that? What else? I mean, what can be said that hasn't been said or anyone else isn't going to say? It is just beautiful. The music was great, although I would have preferred they used some music actually from the civil rights movement more than anything, just because I hate anything with millennials, really. But one downside I'd had to say was really that main guy that we were having, the time traveler, just because he was a bit confusing to me, because I mean, he was put in prison for basically mass murder, and then you've got him in here just purely to be a racist, and I'm like, okay, kind of mixing crimes a bit. Oh, okay, not saying that a mass murderer can't be a racist, it's just a bit weird with his priorities in a sense. But oh yeah, I mean, Rosa was definitely handled brilliantly. I loved seeing all the figures that we saw as well, and it is going to absolutely be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who to date. I don't think we're going to get something quite that emotional again. Well, maybe we will.
Okay, let's move over to Josh.
Yeah, I really like this episode, and I'm pretty much going to echo what everybody else has said. I believe that this is definitely the best historical episode that they've written in both modern and classic, because the thing I didn't like about historical episodes was the fact that they always included an alien. I think there might have been one episode that didn't include like an alien or something like that. And I just thought that was not, sorry. I thought that was nice that, you know, they didn't force an alien in there. And it really dealt with a lot of sensitive issues that I was like, I never thought I would see in Doctor Who. I was like, this is still a children's show, right? Because like it was just a lot of, it was just heart-wrenching to watch at times, and it was funny at times. It was like every emotion in the book, basically, and it was just really well directed, really well executed. And I thought it's definitely in my top 10 Doctor Who episodes.
Yeah, I thought it was a really brilliant episode. Like it definitely educated me. I didn't really know much about Rosa Parks until I saw this episode. Like it was about her refusing to leave her seat. Like that they hadn't. I like that they had Martin Luther King in this episode as well, who too is a historical figure. I like that they gave Yasmin a bit more to do. I like that there were no actual alien villains in this one. Just the time traveling criminal who was trying to rewrite history. I thought it was quite a brilliant episode.
Let's move over to Dr. Grimm.
I originally went into it thinking, are they going to be a bit preaching like on a few other episodes in the past? But I'm happy to say I didn't see much of that at all. I think it was an outstanding episode and really, really good. I mean, I watched it with my wife and my mother-in-law, and they were amazed by it. they thought it was fantastic. For me, I went through a range of emotions, and quite honestly, I felt disgusted, absolutely disgusted. I mean, perhaps I shouldn't, but I was, the way that they were treated down in, I don't know what it was like in North America at the time, but I know it was South America mainly. But yeah, I thought the cinematography was amazing. The sound was amazing. I think the acting was much improved by Jodie. I think Graham is still the standout actor in the team. Yaz, very much improved. Ryan, he had a bit more to do, and he has improved, but I'm still not quite sure on him. But I think the standout actor in that was Vinette Robinson, who played Rosa. I think she was amazing at what she had to do. When they were on the bus, I quite honestly cringed and had to look away. The way the bus driver spoke to Rosa, I thought, oh, if that would happen to me, I don't know what I'd have done. I actually, after the episode, went onto Wikipedia and had a look at, what had happened to Rosa and all that. And I have to say, about the BBC, they handled that excellently. It was historically correct, the way that the Rosa had to get on the bus at the start, pay, then walk back off, and then she had to get back on in the back. So a lot of it was historically correct, and kudos to the BBC for it. Yeah, so for me, it's one of the best episodes I've ever seen.
Okay, let's move on over to William.
Hey, on everybody. You can say that for those who've been just watching it since 2005 and just came on, when Jodie took over, that this is going to be maybe to them, one of the best episodes ever. And in a way, I agree with it. It is a great episode, especially the first 10 minutes when they arrived there and then this guy got slapped in the face. I was totally shocked. But I'm a little bit upset and a little bit ticked off at the same time that I'm getting sick and tired. When they do great historical stories, you got to use an alien or a time traveler in your story. And I'm a little bit, and then the last time that Doctor Who ever did a historical episode on TV, you got to go back to the Fifth Doctor. And then, and those of us who listen to the audience, we have heard stories of historical episodes that had no alien whatsoever. Like Farewell Great Macedon and the Peterloo Massacre. No alien whatsoever. And there was a sad story and it was a great story. I'm not saying that this is not a great episode, but you did not need that alien element whatsoever. You could have tweaked it here and there, that something could have happened to Rosa, that she was not going to make it to the appointment, and that these people had to help her to make it there for the history could take its place. And it was great to see that actress play her. She played it very well. And hopefully she might get a nomination for it. Everybody played their role real well. It was great to see it. And then hopefully it will show these actors do other great roles in their future episodes coming on. Because if you notice that Graham and his grandson, even though Graham has stood up to him on 2 occasions, when he got slapped, and then later on when they pretended they went fishing, his grandson didn't really, in a way, show him respect like that. So that, you're letting this little thing continue going on during the season between these two. I think it'd be better. After because some of us had seen the trailer for next episode. That after, like I said before, after like maybe another story to it, I would like to see how the Doctor would travel without anybody to see what kind of adventure she would get into. Would it be an history one, or just a straight out alien one? You just see how this Doctor can deal with it by herself, because so far, even though she's been doing good as a doctor, she needs help in certain situations. When she confronted the Traveler by herself and even took away his equipment, that stood out good. I would like to see more of that with her. I would love to see that more. But since we got such a niche group of actors with her, it's going to be hard to show her pop out by herself in certain areas like that. So, like I said, it's a good story. I got nothing bad about it. Only I'm sick and tired of either an alien or a time traveler getting involved in this in history when we have seen in the past, and then Big Finish that you don't need that. So that's my opening statement.
All righty. Okay, hang on. Josh, what did you want to add?
Going back to what William said about not having like a time traveler or anything like that, if we didn't have that, then there wouldn't be a science fiction element. And they're worried. And on Big Finish, you can get away with that because it's Big Finish. It's just audio. They're not trying to, maintain viewership, really. They're not worried about TV ratings. Like, it's a science fiction show, so that's why they had a little bit of, like, the time travel thing added to it.
Okay.
But that's
Graham,
pretty much all I want to say.
Go ahead. All right, Graham, what did you want to add?
Well, I'd agree with Josh to a certain degree, and not just that. Never mind the fact that Peter Davison was the last accurate historical with Black Orchid. If you want to be technical, the last historical was Matt Smith and Vincent the Doctor. Invisible Chicken aside.
I think they wanted to, I think they meant like historical as in there was no alien influence at all, and that would have been Black Orchid because there was, it all centered around what was going on in that mansion. I think that's what they meant, like pure historical. Pure evil word. All right, William, you wanted to add something to your statement?
All right, I got some funny feeling that people think, because remember, a lot of us are different age groups like that. You got to remember that Doctor Who originally was not a science fiction program. It was supposed to be an educational program. That is why the first episode dealt with the Doctor meeting the Antidote Man and helping them with fire. And then, of course, the second one was a science fiction one. But if you notice, every other story, they had historical elements to it. And then, yeah, sorry, Graham, the Black Oil was the last historical with any last alien interference whatsoever, unless you go back to Big Finish. I think right now somebody in the interview was complaining that why Doctor Who is doing history when it's supposed to be a science fiction program when it's not. It's a drama program, and drama just what helps the Doctor and the program is the Doctor travels in time and deals with certain situations that's happening in history. That's how come. I mean, some people remember. He knows you're not supposed to interfere history whatsoever. You're not supposed to change one page of history. That we learned that in the Aztecs. I think whether other episodes would do history like that, we wait and find out. Because as for this one, we're not worried about it. This is a science, not a science. It is not a plain science fiction program. It is a drama that has a person that can travel in space and time.
Okay, I'll let Josh add one more thing when we go back to opening statements. Go ahead, Josh.
But my thing is, like, I know that it originally was supposed to be an educational program, but it evolved over time. And my whole take was, I always thought it was sci-fi because here in America, it's market. It says sci-fi. Like if you look at BBC America and the TV listings, it says sci-fi. So I always just thought it was a sci-fi show with, dramatic elements added to it. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That's okay. We'll debate it again in a little bit here. Let's go to Callum.
Respect is due to the writers. It's a very, very wobbly tightrope to walk on this one, and they walked it very well. Nicely balanced. Like they did. You could say maybe get rid of the time agent or whatever it was, but you maybe need that in there, otherwise it's going to be difficult to get. I don't know how they do it without him. But yeah, impressive. Really like this story. Solid. Yeah. yeah, everyone seemed to play a part to play and work well. Yeah, that's enough for me.
Okay, let's move over to Connor Farley.
Best thing about this episode was that it had the subtlety of a sledgehammer, and that works because when you're portraying something like this, which is pretty obviously a risk. I mean, you would not see a show tackle such an event probably quite the way that Doctor Who have just done it, without having a certain amount of fear. And we had some personal niggles going into it, wondering how it was going to get handled and how it was going to be received. And I'm shocked. I really am. It had a few issues, but overall, as a story, it was bloody fantastic. It was amazing. It was true to the event. It was true to the history. It was dark. It was very dark. It was harrowing, but at the same time, it was heartwarming and it was awe-inspiring. And it was everything that a TV show should, especially as educational as Doctor Who should be. It should make you think about historical periods like that and what we've learned from it and what we can take from seeing things like that. And the acting in it was phenomenal. Finally feels like the ensemble is coming together. Jodie, after my criticisms last week, has found her way. Vinette Robinson, who is an exceptional actor, amazing in this as well as Parks, can definitely see this getting at least a nod in some form of award. I'm not sure how elite they'd go with that. I don't think they'd quite go for BAFTA, but maybe a Hugo Award or something. But for an episode, the production value actually of this episode as well, which no one's mentioned, the fact that they would take a South African Cape Town and make it look like Montgomery, and actually make it look quite accurate with all the cars and the buses and everything, that added to it. But yeah, I think that the crowning glory of this episode is that, which is a criticism for many I've seen, is that it has the subtlety of a sledgehammer and it actually is quite affecting. And to have two companions in there that's directly affected by the odious events of that time period added to it. I think that Ryan and Yasmin, in terms of the TARDIS team, are the standouts. And usually I expected for 10 weeks to say that Graham would be the standout, but actually I think Ryan and Yaz stole it this week. Yeah, fantastic all around. Very moving, very affecting. Exactly what it needed to be. And I hope it inspires Doctor Who to take more risks with the historicals in the future, because there's no point in putting out a show like this where you need to educate and you can learn from it if you're playing it safe all the time.
All righty then. Okay, let's move on over to Texas Tim.
I thought it was good, but I think it was just a little bit, again, too preachy for me. I thought going into it, that's what I was worried about. And then for the first 10 minutes or so, it was great. But then there were a couple of unnecessary scenes, it seemed like, that just made it seem like they were, and it seems to me now that this is the new remit for the show, that it should be a bit educational. Like last week's guns are bad, and this week racism is bad, which is fine. And as everybody has said, that it looked great. It looked wonderful. I mean, the sets and all that stuff were really, really good. And the actors were fine. But I mean, I think it just could have been better. As far as the idea that there's an alien, or not an alien, but a human being from that far in the future, there's going to be a white supremacist that's going to go back in time just to niggle some events so that never happens, is really stupid. Because even in our time, most of the time when you see a white supremacist, you just point your finger and laugh at him because they're so ridiculous. I mean, nobody takes them seriously. And the idea that this guy's from the future and still has that kind of attitude is really silly. And second of all, wouldn't it have been better for him to do something to upset the Civil War rather than a small event, which is a big event, but like Rosa Parks is just one of many events that crescendoed during that period to get us to where we are today. I would have thought if he really wanted to upset history, he would have done something with the Civil War. But I didn't write the episode. I mean, overall, it was a good episode, but I don't think it was as outstanding as being made out to be. I think it could have been better in a lot of ways. As far as the Doctor goes, again, I do think having 3 companions is a little bit too many. I think they might have made a mistake there. I mean, I don't have a problem with any one of them at all. I think they're all doing a fine job for what they do, but she does get kind of lost in it. And like people have said, like last week, that it doesn't seem like she's the lead character at all. She's not really in charge. There's just 4 lead characters doing their thing. I think that's something that needs to be worked out. That's all I got for now.
Okay, let's move on over to Graham.
For me, I enjoyed this. Texas Tim's issue about being too preachy, as Jodie noted. It can be interpreted that way, depending on your viewpoint. But I think this was dealt with a lot better than initially could have been intended. I remember joking with Beefhead last week that it could have turned into an episode of Quantum Leap. Thankfully, the Renegade Time Agent aside, that wasn't the case here. Is Jodie a wee bit lost in the shuffle with the ensemble of companions? Possibly. But it's the direction the show has chosen to take at this point, and we're just going to have to ride it out. This is probably, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a damn sight better than I expected it to be. And the guy who played the bus driver in this done a really fine job. And excuse my language here, and feel free to bleep this out, Dr. Freedom. He was a complete bastard. If he's done that, he's done his job. So kudos to the bus driver. Rosa Parks, excellent. The regular cast, superb. Bradley Walsh still has some superior one-liners in this. You know, do you have Elvis's phone number and all the rest of it? He's still the standout for me in this. Yaz and Ryan had a lot more to do in this episode as well, obviously due to the subject matter. I take Tim's points on board, and I take other folks' points on board. Still some issues to be ironed out, but very, very enjoyable for a historical episode.
Go ahead, Beefhead. Your turn.
Yeah, this has been the strongest episode, I think, so far of the season. I did have reservations going into this, how they were going to do it. And luckily, I think what they did manage to do was they didn't let the science aspect get in the way of the story too much. The idea was to safeguard history. I personally, going into this, didn't know much about the Rosa Parks story. I was tempted to read into it, but I didn't, because I wanted to see if it was doing the job that historicals are meant to do within Doctor Who, is to sort of teach you a lesson, which it did. And I think if you had a younger audience doing it, it managed to do that effectively. I think a lot of this is down to the writing. I would like to think Marjorie Blackman has written about 95% of the episode, and 5% of it was Chris Chibnall, to be honest with you, because tonally it was a lot better than the last 2. They dialed back Jodie. I think that was probably because of the nature of what is a very delicate subject matter, which they handled effectively. So I think you do have to have a dial back. I like Yaz had more to do. Ryan was a lot more on point as well, and I've got to think. I think Graham was really good. I think one of the standout points for me with Graham was actually the actual culmination of the episode, where he didn't want to be a part of what was actually happening, and he was the guy that forced the situation, and you could get that sense of uncomfortability with him. So that was really effectively done. Like Connor said, the setting, it looked and felt authentic, and Vinette Robinson was superb as Rosa Parks. There was an aspect, there was one bit, I think, that was the scene that was preachy, which is with Yaz and Ryan hiding behind the bins, referencing the modern situation. I think you got enough of that within the episode without it having to be hammered home in that respect. It was an unnecessary thing that did come across a little bit preachy. I like the fact that the Doctor went to go and face off against the sort of the villain of the piece, Kravos, but because he already had a limiter in him, it didn't make the threat real. So her action rung for me a little bit hollow. Yes, I agree with what the guys said to a certain degree with there being a lot of people, because it did at one point seem a little bit Scooby Gang. And for me, in fact, apart from the villain of the piece, Jodie was actually the weakest aspect, the only weak part, the only other weak part to it, because there really wasn't much that she did or could have done. Whether that's just like you want to say, well, that's part of the story. I want to see her facing off against something without limitations, without inhibitors in place. Yeah, okay, the guy grabs around the throat. That's probably they're going for a visceral response, but it was always a half-hearted thing because you knew it couldn't go anywhere. There was still a big reliance on the sonic, but don't get me wrong, those small criticisms aside, it was still overall a very strong episode. I liked the music worked excellently well with it. I wasn't a big fan of the popular music coming in at the end. I think it would have been good to just let second your in-house composer do that, because I'll tell you what, he's doing such really great work. Why do you need to sort of undermine the great work that he's doing by just chucking in a popular song to it? But overall, I'm satisfied. This was going to be a real sort of make or break type thing, and they did handle it well. It gives me hope for the future, but I couldn't understand the motivations of Kravos. It was by far a big improvement on last week.
All righty then. Our hands already shooting up. Before we go to that, science fiction, one of the great things about it is they've always handled subjects like this with allegory. And I was sitting here after I saw this episode, and I started thinking back, to some very classic examples that I had seen growing up. And one of the things that always stuck out, especially regarding the racism topic, as DWC brought up, it was kind of sort of addressed in The Mutants, where you had the transmat capsules that were labeled Solonians and Overlords. That type of segregation was still going on, even in the Earth Empire at that time. And also another famous one that really stuck out in my mind was Let That Be Your Last Battlefield by Star Trek. Very powerful story about segregation, racism, and just how powerful that hatred could go, to the point that, you had these two guys that were basically, you find out at the end of the episode, they're the only ones left. Their very hatred that they were still pursuing had wiped out their entire homeworld. It had resulted in a war, and they were the last two left, and they were still hating each other at the end. And it was a very powerful episode, just stood out in my mind to this day. Also, another very powerful example that maybe a lot of people have forgotten was from Twilight Zone, the movie. The one segment here with the actor Vic Morrow, where you have this man who's obviously still carrying this type of hatred in his heart, and suddenly he finds himself whisked back to Nazi Germany. Another scene he does find himself whisked into is a lynching in Southern America, as well as he ends up in Vietnam and is being hunted down there as well. This also resulted in his death, I have to say. There was a helicopter accident. You may want to read up on it. But these are for some very powerful ways that science fiction or this type of platform can bring a subject forward. But, this one just, like this example in Twilight Zone, dealt with it head on, did not put any kid gloves, and said, look, this type of thing happened, and hopefully someday we'll evolve beyond it. And I'm really hoping we do, because we do have the capability to come together when we have to, but sometimes it's hard to see it. Okay, I've got hands up all over the board, so I'm going to go ahead and just start randomly picking them off. Okay, let's start off with Connor Farley. Go on ahead.
Two things. One, with Krasker, I think his motivations were a bit muddled, but I would argue that in a way, aside from the vortex manipulating his various weapons, it is a bit pure historical, because his motivation of stopping the bus boycott because he's a racist is quite in tune with that time. So by putting himself in that position, he's not much different from the white people in that setting anyway. So aside from the fact that it's from the far future, and even though I don't necessarily think that, in fact, I find it quite difficult thinking whether it would have been better without him there or with him there. I think that it kind of was pure historical in a sense. And the second thing is, one thing that I did like about the episode is that it wasn't actually anti-white or pro-black. It was just realist down the middle. You didn't have any real moments where you felt like that it had a leaning towards being pro-white or pro-black. It was just very centered and very real to the story. And I think that that's one of the things that noticing make it so special, because usually a historical will have a political leaning, and I can't really find a point in this one where there really was one. And I think that just kind of adds to how this is a lot better than most historicals we've had in recent years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say that one thing I forgot to mention that I really did like was how that the Doctor and his company got caught up in the event, the actual event itself. I mean, they were trying to manipulate the event so that it would go on target as it had in the past and defeat this guy from messing it up. And yet they ended up becoming part of the numbers. In other words, they had to stay on the bus and deal with it, which you realize was kind of hard for Graham, obviously, because he's familiar with that event probably more than the others are. But I mean, I thought that was very effective. I thought that was kind of funny in a way that they got stuck on the bus. So.
Cresco, the time agent's motives aside, fair point by Connor. He is just basically echoing the mindset of people within the relevant place at that given time period. Would I have done anything different? Probably no. Again, it just comes into as four in a TARDIS team too many. Time will tell on that, but early doors, Davison syndrome seems to be slightly in effect, but not to that extent yet. Hopefully it improves.
Okay. Basically, the whole thing about I actually like the whole thing about I forgot his name, but the time agent guy, because I liked the whole aspect of him slightly trying to, change events without drastically changing events in order for something not to happen. I was kind of on the edge of my seat the whole episode, even though in my mind I knew nothing was going to happen. It still was like, what if he actually messes this up? Kind of got in the back of my head. So I actually like that aspect of everything, and I don't understand. The one thing I don't like about this series so far is I feel like there are too many companions. Like, we don't know anything about her parents or her siblings or anything, and she's just kind of there because she knows Ryan, and she's not even fleshed out. So I think 4 companions, or 3, is it 3 or 4? I think it's 3, yeah. 3 companions is a bit too much, especially for a 10-episode, series, and especially if we get like another Bill situation where they're only there for one series. It kind of like feels like it's too much to go over in 10 episodes.
Well, they're going to go more into Yasmin's family in an upcoming episode. I believe that's Demons of the Punjab, if I remember right. You're going to meet her mother and things like that. They're going to go a bit more into her past in an upcoming episode. So you will learn more about Yasmin.
Well, interesting in the beginning when after this guy got slapped in the face and Rosa Parks had to come in to calm it down, she mentioned a child named Emmett Till. Now, anybody who doesn't know who he is, just Google him, and you find out what tragedy happened to this child back then in that era. Considering we who now live in the 21st century, in some places still deal with that, because in some places it still happens, even though you don't hear it in the news. It still happens, and they keep it down low. I still say the actress who played Rosa Parks, in my opinion, like I think Connor said, she should get a nomination for this acting. I mean, she played her role real well, and I you know what, I look forward to see what her next project is, see how she acts. I mean, I look forward to it.
Yeah, this episode should definitely be up for a Hugo, a Saturn, and many more awards. It was very, very well done.
Yeah, something I actually forgot to mention in the opening was really the best character in this more than anything I thought was actually Ryan, mostly because he didn't actually, if you remember, he didn't know who Rosa Parks was. He thought she was a first woman bus driver and stuff like that, but which was frankly kind of funny, which brings to the point that really one of the best things on this episode, it wasn't just beautiful in the sense of how it handled the racism issue, but it also did find moments on how to be funny as well. It did actually know where the humor needed to be, and Ryan, like I said, really the best character for that. And equally, when I said that he didn't actually know who Rosa Parks was, interesting thing. I don't know how. From what I get from American sitcoms in America, you're quite big on your history. Over here, don't really teach history that excessively, and very few people will have heard Rosa Parks, but won't really go full in depth of her story. And if anything, that's what this episode is. Why this episode, if anything, is really important, because we're not really going to have that taught much in schools that often.
I did like a callback to the Storm Cage, where River Song was holed up for quite a while. So that was a nice little add-on from the past in the series. That was good. Also, you know, when he was at the that time traveler was at the TARDIS, did he put a force field around it, or did he just say, "Oh, it has a force field around it" when he was trying to get into it?
He tried to zap it, and the shot didn't affect it at all. He was trying to send it off to another time.
Right, and that's why he said "old force field." I thought he meant that he put one around it so they couldn't get back into it. That's what confused me. Okay, fair enough.
Well, just going back to what other people have said, really, and just going over that, the time agent, if you like, or anti-Jack Harkness, or anti-Jack for short, I thought was. Well, somebody said, I can't remember who said it, but you know, you have to have a time traveler or an alien, and I thought this guy was good for the story, if you like. He was okay, so he didn't really do much, but at the end of the day, we've got another story leading in from him. Where did Ryan send him? What did he do? Is that going to be touched upon in the past? So I think he could be a returning character in the future. Going back to the story itself, like I said at the beginning, I thought it was wonderful. It reminded me of a mixture of, I don't know if any of you guys have seen this, but an episode of Timeless, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. I think it was Far Beyond the Stars, I think the episode was called. It reminded me a lot about that, which I thought was a fantastic episode. Go and watch it if you haven't seen it. Quantum Leap, that somebody mentioned earlier, I thought there was a lot of everything mingled up into this episode, which, as a science fiction fan, not just a Doctor Who fan, as a sci-fi fan, this is probably one of the reasons why I love this episode so much. Not only do I like Doctor Who, I like science fiction, and the episode itself was wonderful. I really honestly can't put anything wrong with it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and people are nitpicking about this, that, and the other. But seriously, really, for an episode of Doctor Who, for an episode of just science fiction in general, really, this was brilliant.
I'd agree with a lot of what Lee said there. Just on the point, the rogue time agent, I know it's a wee bit a dubious subject as to whether he should have been there or not. At the same time, as much as we gripe about that these things whereby it's a time traveller, it's always an alien, it's never a pure historical, I suppose there has to be some type of hurdle for the TARDIS team to overcome. Otherwise, what's the point of the bloody episode? shout out to the fella who played the cop who burst into the hotel room. Really reminiscent of the, shall we say, the long arm of the law in the South at that time period. Well versed, well up to speed in his job, and he wasn't taking any stick off no Negroes or Mexicans. So if the actors are making you believe it as much as this, you know they're doing a bang-up job. So fair play to both him and again, obviously, to the racist bus driver. It wasn't exactly on the buses, but what the hell, it was South Africa, we'll do.
One thing I would say as well about this episode that it seemed to be a lot better than the previous two as well is that there wasn't a lot of fluff and buster about getting straight into the story. They actually, for once, got straight into it, which gave it a lot better pacing overall. One of the other good things I liked about it was there were, you still had references to Grace in this, enough that she, cast enough of a shadow over everyone that's in the group, to be honest with you, that does make me think that she will potentially come back some way in the future, whether that events are changed by which she comes back to life, and that could be a reason for Graham's departure. I don't know. Or whether they'll revisit her at an earlier point in her life. But going back to Krasko, I think the problem I think that a lot of people probably experiencing with it is that to have a believable opposite, you have to wonder what they get out of it at the end, and to say that obviously he didn't have an out planned apart from the vortex manipulator. And you couldn't actually tell what he was going to get out of it at the end, apart from that he's a racist. So there really isn't a motivation because he's just a bad person. I get that, but I'd have liked that a little bit more to the character to give him a little bit more realism. Please don't, before anyone lambasts me or anything like that in the comments, understand I did enjoy this, but there still has to be caveats to it, that there are things that perhaps I'd have liked to have seen done to give it a better overall feeling. Ignorance come back out.
To follow up on what Beef said about the episode, the beginning of it, how it started, it did seem like they weren't necessarily coming off of last week. It seemed like there'd been some sort of gap. So this could have easily been placed later in the series, or maybe that's where some of these upcoming books are going to be squeezed in, or the big finish eventually. But it did seem like they weren't necessarily coming on across from last week's story. I think it did seem like they'd been at this for a few minutes, so we'll see where they go from there.
Just to pick both of Tim's up on the point with regards to the rogue time agent. Very fair point. I think the main crux of the matter is, you need a hurdle, but indeed, what was his motivation? It just can't be, oh look, he's a racist white boy for the future. So maybe that's something they could have tightened up a bit in the writing.
It's been touched upon, but one thing that I liked is that they're not holding back on Jodie's character. And what I'm referencing is where Krasko grabbed her by the neck. A fear was that Jodie would be portrayed, because she's a woman, as being fragile. And there was a fear of obviously a very pro SJW viewpoint on her doctor, and to have a scene like that where it just kind of puts all gender aside and treats her like any other character, I thought brought something else out in the series, because I think a criticism we've had of the series so far is that it's quite not anti-male, but it's portraying males as less something than women. And to kind of have that little bit reversed, where amongst this visceral topic of racism, you have just that little moment where it's actually quite eye-opening that Doctor Who would so early on attach itself to the idea of like tackling an issue where by Jodie is actually assaulted by someone, I think just adds to the visceralness of the episode. And I think that that's a direction that, while not necessarily they should just hit her around every week and cause her great damage, I think that they shouldn't ignore it. They shouldn't ignore that in an adventure show like this, where you're coming up against great alien threats, it can happen, and it should happen, because that's drama. So I am kind of glad that it did kind of go into a little bit of territory whereby Jodie is in a situation like that, because there was a fear that she wouldn't be put in a situation like that, at least not in her first series.
Yeah, everyone, I just wanted to clarify something, clear something up, because everyone keeps calling Kresko rogue time agent. I just wanted to get this clear, because everyone's keeping saying he's not a rogue time agent. He was just a prisoner. He was just prisoner. He's not any kind of rogue time agent. He actually does establish for the bought and bartered all the way to get that the vortex manipulator. And yeah, I think everyone else has actually kind of highlighted what I was trying to say, but couldn't quite get my words out. That his character didn't make sense, his motivations didn't make sense. But yeah, Kresko, he's a prisoner, not a rogue time agent.
To answer Graham's question, I think like the time traveler was that he was in jail for murder like that. I think is inferred, but it's not mentioned. I think where he's from, he murdered a lot of minorities, but you notice he don't say it. But if you read between the lines, that's why he was locked up for. And if you notice in his expression when he was telling the doctor what how many he killed, he enjoyed it very much. And so I can understand the BBC don't want to get it, don't want to they had to dance around it because then he didn't get to say it. But you could tell by the way he was speaking that he was in jail for murdering a lot of, I would say, minorities or mixed races like that.
Just to follow up on Connor's point of view with regards to the choking scene and the violence, the quote unquote violence against women, that was one of the things we were somewhat fearful of when this series was in production. How's Jodie going to be when it comes to standing up for herself, and how's the portrayal of violence against women going to be maintained and going to be shown, especially with the BBC these days? And they tackled it pretty well here. If they continue it in that form and she continues to stand up for herself, it can only be in good stead for the series going forward.
Well, to follow up on what William was just saying, yeah, obviously he's a psychopath because he kind of just jokes about it, how many people he killed. And you're right, they didn't bring into it whether or not they were aliens or what race they are. Again, I think it's ridiculous that somebody from that far in the future would be a white supremacist or whatever he is. But yeah, he's obviously a psychopath because he doesn't care. He just shrugs it off like, yeah, I killed 200 people the other day, no biggie. As far as the semantics, I mean, technically he's an escaped prisoner who is a rogue time agent. I'm not trying to say that anybody's wrong or right with that, but he's taken time devices and he's playing around with the past. So, I mean, that's basically what he has become. So you're both right.
Just to pick up on what Connor and Graham were saying, yeah, we have spoke about this sort of in the run-up to the series, how they were going to address the issue of, the Doctor in peril, obviously with, Jodie being a woman and the portrayal of violence against women on screen. I get it, but if you put it just like in viewing the characters from that point of view, she already knew that his rehabilitation involved some sort of thing that controlled him actually not being able to kill anyone or anything like that. So although there was that visceral action, it rung hollow because the Doctor really wasn't unsure of what the outcome was going to be. Knew that really nothing could happen. What I hope and what I would like to see in the future is that there is that aspect of, well, as a viewer, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how this person is going to react. Now, I'm not saying that I want to see having 10 bells beaten out of her every week. That's far from it. And I think it raises so many questions for a viewing audience and as a broadcaster that is obviously very hard to tackle. But that sort of undermined it. I think maybe also what I would like to see, and hopefully we will see in the future, is perhaps to see a female opposite, and then you can have that free reign. Because it is a case of, you've got a guy who's a villain again. I'd like to see a female villain. I'm not saying it has to be Missy, but I think you also need to build up that there needs to be a strong female opposite as well in the interest of balance.
Just to carry on from the handling of throttling Jodie, it would have been good for her to use a Volusia Aikido just to slam him on his back to show who's boss. That would have been a nice little touch to her. And what's the other thing about the time agent himself? Oh yeah, everyone must remember that he's got an inhibitor in his head which stops him from committing any murder or kill at this point. So he couldn't have gone any further than what he did in the episode anyway, even though he wanted to. So that's that point there.
Well, it's not the reason the whole scene with the strangling being brought up because she's been cast as a woman. We wouldn't be remarking on it if it was either Smith or Tennant who was in the same scenario. Of course, he wouldn't have tried that with Capaldi. But I'm just saying that it's only because Jodie's or the Doctor is a woman now that we're remarking on it. If you think about it, we wouldn't have brought it up otherwise. It would have just been a scene. And Tim is right. I mean, the idea that he has an inhibitor does kind of take some of the drama out of the scene because he can't do anything. So I don't get the point of that, but there you go.
Yeah, if I was writing it, I would have simply just interjected the following. If you kill Rosa Parks, you're resulting in a major paradox that would have wiped out your entire future timeline, something along that. But if you nudge the event out of place, timeline stays intact, you get what you want. And to me, that's how I would have written it and left the whole neural inhibitor thing out personally. But at the same time, as Philip brought up, that way you can introduce part where he tries to strangle her and go, oh, Volusia Aikido, bam. Catches him completely off guard, doesn't see it happening, and next thing you know, bam, she's back in control of the situation. But that's how I would have written it, because to me, the neural inhibitor, yeah, I agree, did take a bit of the threat out of the whole situation.
Philip, you were saying about how he couldn't have gone the full way even if he wanted to. He didn't actually want to kill Rosa. He just wanted to nudge history. That was the point that Jodie was making. As for the oddity about Krasko being a white supremacist in the future, I'm not sure that it's too far-fetched, because even now, 60 years later, we're still tackling racism, and I don't necessarily ever think that we'll see an end to it. So I think by having a racist from the future in the episode, I don't think that that's strange at all, because I think that it's actually probably going to be quite accurate to some people's certain points of view.
Certainly in the future we'll all be of mixed race anyway, so it's hardly an argument any sane person would have that they're a white supremacist, when in fact everybody's a mix-up of everything by that time, I would guess.
Yeah, but you still have people with that kind of belief, even through history, that still be there.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, and people point and laugh at them because they're stupid people. They don't have any brains, especially in the States, which is the youngest country on the planet, and yet people think God made America for the white man.
It doesn't stop someone from being a white supremacist, though. The fact that they get laughed at is what I'm saying. So I just don't think that it's an odd thing at all.
Sadly, as you brought up, I could see it still hanging around even then, because whether you like it or not, you always have a few bad eggs everywhere that believe their view of the world is right. And we don't know Krasko's background, unfortunately. We don't know what led him to make this decision, that he thought that this was going to somehow change things in his future, or make it even better. We don't know. But like, I agree with Connor. Here we are 60 years later. We're still murdering each other in quarrels over tribal god images. We're still dealing with racism. Sometimes you think, we aren't really doing that well. But at the same time, when bad events happen, we do notice that people still come together. There's always still that human element. So there's still hope for the future. Maybe someday, somewhere, it'll fade away to a point that, unfortunately, you're still going to have the occasional bad egg like Krasko running around. Yeah, sadly, it happens.
No, just to put the guys up on the inhibitor thing, that's a point Julie noted, and it's a segment of the episode I completely forgot about. So, yeah, you completely right, guys. That does detract from the threat, but at the same time, it was meant for them to try.
Just going back to what everybody else has been saying, really, mainly about the prisoner. I think there's a lot of story out there. I know there's no story arc, if you like, to this season, but I think with after last week's episode about when they mentioned about the Doctor's past, something she's hiding, and this prisoner now going sent back somewhere where we don't know where he's been, and his backstory as well, which has just been brought upon. What were his intentions? What is his motivations behind it? I would like to see something like that. So I think there's having no story arc for this particular season. I'm thinking that if not, it's going to be mentioned towards the end of the season. Maybe it could be something as an arc, if you like, for season 12 or series 12. I'm quite looking forward to it. I would like to know about these the backstories, especially after last week when the obviously, like I've just mentioned, the Child of Time. You know, what's all that about? Is there an arc? I think there's one dug under the soil somewhere, which we've got to try and figure out for ourselves. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, to pick up the guys in the inhibitor thing explained why he couldn't just kill Rosa Parks. I think that was the point of the inhibitor. Can't think of something else I was going to say. Yeah, I like this story a hell of a lot.
Is it a bit crass of me to ask whether we could have seen a bit more black unrest? I know they spoke about the what do you call it, where they sit down in front of the bus and stuff. I wanted to see a bit more visual black unrest in that town to sort of like recognise why the racism is happening, because you've got black people doing this and that they shouldn't, and that's why the whites are being pissed off about them. You understand where I'm coming from? I wanted to see a representation of black unrest in the actual episode, more than just...
You wanted to see an uprising from your brothers and sisters, Phil?
More or less, yeah.
Unfortunately, Philip, as I said, this was less than 90 years after the Civil War. Sadly, this type of thing was still lingering for this long. It wasn't a matter of there was unrest. It was just a simple matter of you had a group of people who believed it should be this way, and they wouldn't let it go.
But you know what? The racism does still happen, not just for the blacks. Look how Americans stole America from the Indians. That's a form of racism, isn't it? They kind of nearly kicked them out of their own land. So, you know,
to be fair, that wasn't the Americans at the time. That was, shall we say, the settlers.
Yeah, and at least we didn't try to take over the whole planet, Phil.
Yeah.
That'll be dealt with, and that'll be dealt with in the upcoming episode, Dances with TARDISes.
You know, as a funny, you can say as an afterthought, I wonder if the sheriff that appeared in the hotel will remember the name Steve Jobs and the telephone that has that do all these little stuff that we know about it now. That would have been a funny little joke at the end if that would have happened. You know, they would have showed it or mentioned it.
I just love the fact that Elvis got a mention.
And Sinatra,
And Sinatra, of course. Oh, but come on, Elvis, forget it.
For the humour, actually, that reminded me, my favourite quip was the Bansky one. That was genius because obviously no one really knows who Bansky is. So the idea of having it as the Doctor, someone who kind of just walks through time and has been in many places, I mean, it's funny and it just kind of fits. What Philip was saying, I actually agree with you. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more disputes between white people and black people, but then you could argue that they would reach a sort of a threshold where it starts taking over the story, and it just overwhelms the simmering action of the moment. And but yeah, I think that there should have been a little bit more unrest, but I guess that at the same time, even in those days, there wasn't someone getting mugged or someone getting kicked off buses or whatever every single moment of the day. So while it was not a frequent thing, I still think that when it happened, it was as powerful as it would have been if it was happening every single second of the episode.
Yeah, they didn't want to cover it in the episode, and I don't blame them because there were beatings, lynch mobs, murders left and right that were never, ever addressed by the law. As I said before, I don't know if I brought it up the cast. My father and my mother grew up in Mississippi during this time. And one day I can't remember if it was a television program or a movie, but I was out in the garage with my father, and we just brought up the subject, and he told me things that he saw just growing up as a kid in that time. And he'll tell you, and he just looked at me and he goes, I said, Dad, where was the law? Where was the police? What happened? He goes, the police were probably the ones who were doing it or in on it. It's just, that's how bad it was then. It's not an easy time. It's a very dark part of American history. It very is. You know, I can't even find the words. See, I'm already stumbling on my own words. It's just the things he told me literally curled what hair I had then. It did.
Just a wee shout out to the wee segment at the end whereby we ended on a wee viewing of the Comet Rosa parts, whatever the number was. I thought that was a nice touch. I don't know if that's legit or no. Could somebody maybe clarify that, or if that was just for the purposes of rounding off the story?
That's a true thing.
Is it? Cool. Thank you.
But one brief point I want to bring up before I go to the next person. Not all white people agreed with it. They didn't. There were people who were in, the movement who were, white, who did not like the way this was going as well. So it's not all whites who were in on this. It just wasn't, simply that issue. There were a lot of white people who did not agree with the things they saw. It's just if you spoke about it openly, then you shared the same fate.
Well, to follow up on what Connor said about and Philip also about wanting to see more, I think the Doctor implied that this was just the beginning of what was a big, large movement at the end. Because this did spark the sit-ins at restaurants and the marches, and it did, like I said, become a bit of a crescendo to where the federal government could no longer just look the other way, and they ended up having to get involved in that one place. But yeah, I thought it was a good touch though that they did show a little clip of the actual Rosa Parks receiving some kind of award from the president. It's a shame it took 40 years, but I mean, at least she did get recognition. And as Graham pointed out, there is an asteroid named after her now. So that's all good and well.
Briefly, just hitting on what's just been said, Tim. I like, completely going off context just for a moment, the new view screen, if you like, in the TARDIS. I quite like that. The fact that it's all on the wall and that everyone's able to view. Instead of a little monitor going around, I quite like the fact that there's like a little screen on the wall where you can go and view. But just going back to the story, if tonight's episode can actually bring any type of, I don't know, education to people, because this episode, this new Doctor Who is aimed at families and children. If families or children can actually get some kind of education from this episode, then I think we're doing all right, because there's not much about it nowadays. It is either a lot of racism, it's a lot of hatred, it's a lot of violence. This episode of Doctor Who, a UK TV show, Doctor Who, I think is going to put so much of a spotlight, not only on the TV show, but as a topic in general. And I think that just one little tiny minuscule episode of a British TV show, I think, could cause a lot of change in the world as we know it. But that's just my opinion. That's my hope as well. And that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, we've gone on for quite a bit now, a little bit longer than I anticipated, but, it is a very controversial issue. And I'd like to think that we've come a long, long way from that time. The path's still not all the way clear. We still got a ways to go. We really do. And hopefully in the future, this will be something we look back on and just think, wow, was it really like that? Because that's what we're doing right now, is we're looking back on 1955. And hopefully someday in the future, if, oldsters like me are still around, we can look back and go, damn, things have gotten a lot better. Because, it's just not an easy issue to address. Okay, so let's go ahead and rate this thing. We'll put it to bed. All right, we're going to start at the top with Philip Archer out of 10. How do you rate Rosa?
This is a standout episode for the season so far. It got me in all sorts of ways and emotions, and this easily gets a 10 for me. So that's it, a 10.
Okay, Lee?
10. 10 on 10. 100%. One of the best episodes I think I've ever seen.
All right, DWC?
I was struggling between a 9 and 10, but yeah, I think I'm going to go with 10.
All right, Bo?
Yeah, I'm going with 10 as well.
All right, Dr. Grimm?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, definitely a 10.
William?
Almost would have got a 10, but since it had a science fiction element instead of a pure historical, I'm knocking it down to an 8.
All right, Callan?
Sure. I'm stuck between 8 and 9. I'll give it a 9.
All right, Connor?
It gets an 8, and it's actually, in turn, shot Demons of the Punjab up to my most anticipated, because now that's a affecting historical to deal with. So I'm interested to see how they deal with that as well.
All right, Texas Tim?
I'll give it an 8.5.
All right, Graham?
No, it's necessarily preachy as the reviews perceived, although I agree with Tim. It can be a tad wee bit preachy in places. But that notwithstanding, I really enjoyed the hell out of this. It shocked the hell out of me. I agree with Tim, 8.5.
All right, Beef?
I'm going to say the same, to be honest with you. I think you can see that, Marjorie Blackman, who's the Children's Poet Laureate, you can see where she's done it, where her input comes from. And I think you could probably pick out where Chris Chibnall's is. I'm looking forward more to the episodes that are written by other people. It was done in such a way that, could have gone very, very badly wrong. I'm going to say 8.5 because, like I say, the villain, Kravos, or whatever his name is, Krakos was an issue. And I do think that Jodie just is still not just there yet. You might hate me for it, but yeah, I'm saying 8.5.
Okay, Matt?
I really enjoyed this. I thought it was such well done. I'm going to give it a cheap and nasty time travel number 10.
All right, and Josh?
I'd probably give it a 9 just because of the whole, I forgot what it's called, but the whole neural implant thing. I thought that was kind of a cop-out. Otherwise, I would give it a 10, but it was just a cop-out to me.
Okay, I'm going to give it a 9.5 for the same reason, 0.5 being for the neural inhibitor. Otherwise, this was very brilliantly handled, very well done. As Beef said, it could have really went south. And I'm not oh God, I just used a bad pun. It could have really went wrong. It really could have. But at the same time, they told it very, very well. But I agree. There are a lot of ways you could have wrote around the neural inhibitor, and I think it would have gave Krasko a bit more of a scare factor if, he didn't have the neural inhibitor. Okay, folks, well, next week, join us for a happy, magical thing that all people enjoy seeing, giant spiders. As we watch Arachnids in the UK, and we'll give it a review and talk it over then. So until then, everybody, take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you on the flip side.
Be seeing you.
Hiya.
See you, everyone.